Efforts to diversify partnerships taking centre stage on the penultimate day of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers Meeting in Kuala Lumpur. Bloc leaders held sessions with 9 dialogue partners, including the world's 2 major powers, the United States and China, both jostling for more support from the region. China making the first move as Beijing announced a new free trade agreement with ASEAN is ready to be signed later this year. Foreign Minister Wang Yi also called on the Bloc to uphold openness amid an unfolding trade war.
同东盟各国一道，弘扬和平、合作、开放、包容的亚洲价值观，建设和平、安宁、繁荣、美丽、友好的共同家园，推动构建更为紧密的中国东盟命运共同体。 在全球南方卓然壮大的历史大势中，加强亚洲的振兴。
Just hours later, the U.S. Secretary of State reaffirming his country's commitment to the Asia-Pacific, even as President Donald Trump makes it a target of a global tariff offensive.
We've been engaged for a very long time, and we have strong partnerships we have no intention of abandoning, but rather strengthening and building upon. The United States is a committed partner to ASEAN.
His comments coming as the U.S. president issued another round of tariff letters, with the heaviest blow reserved for Brazil at 50%. ASEAN member nations Brunei and the Philippines also slapped with higher duties. The revised rates will kick in on the 1st of August if no deal is struck. And more, we're joined by CNA's Leong Wai Kit. Now he is in Kuala Lumpur, and Jagruti Dave in Washington, D.C. Let's start with you, Wai Kit. ASEAN, whatever Mr. Rubio says, is focused on tariffs and trade tensions. How is it planning to address these many confrontations?
Well, ASEAN is taking concrete steps now. It's not only just tapping on its economic, but also its foreign ministers to come up with a unified, comprehensive approach to negotiating these tariffs. Now, recently, there was a ministerial presentation by the economic staff of the Bloc. These presentations were made to the top diplomats gathered here in Kuala Lumpur. The idea is to bring them up to speed about what's been done so far and to also seek these foreign ministers' input. Among the things shared during the meeting included how the economic ministries had simulated trade shocks as well as the impact they may have on things like your supply chains, efforts made to gather input from the private sector as well as plans to integrate ASEAN's economies. What's set to happen next is that the foreign and economic ministers will hold joint meetings ahead of ASEAN's summit, which is slated for October. So if we take a step back, what you have now here is, on the one hand, ASEAN member states directly talking with Washington, and on the other hand, potentially an ASEAN-wide approach, which ASEAN member states can tap on when negotiating directly with Mr. Donald Trump.
All right, Wai Kit, tariff, one concern, but of course, ASEAN, a recurring issue. And every time an ASEAN meeting or summit happens, we will cross to you on this topic, what's happening in Myanmar. We've got dialogue partners, 9 of them meeting for today's meeting, 2 more, that's the EU and the UK, meeting tomorrow. What's the latest on any concrete moves on resolving years of civil war in Myanmar?
Right. Now, the latest is that there will be a combined trip among Malaysia, Philippines and Thailand to Myanmar. That's happening in August, and that is a foreign ministerial level trip to Myanmar. Now, it involves Thailand because Thailand is seen as Myanmar's closest neighbor. Thailand says it understands Myanmar. Malaysia, understandably, because it is this year's ASEAN chair. The Philippines is the incoming Bloc chair for next year. Now, earlier, Thai Foreign Minister Marit Sangiampong talked about how it's important for all stakeholders in Myanmar to come together at the negotiating table. Let's take a listen to what else was said.
และเป็นความตั้งใจของรัฐบาลไทยนะครับในฐานะที่เป็นประเทศที่ใกล้ชิดกับเมียนมารู้จักเมียนมาดีที่สุดก็พยายามที่จะเอาผู้ที่มีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องทั้งหมดนะครับมาร่วมโต๊ะเจรจา โดยทั้งหมดเนี่ยก็เพื่อที่จะต้องให้ผู้ที่มีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องทั้งหลายมา determine future ของตัวเองตามหลักที่สิ่งที่อาเซียนได้ยึดถือแล้วก็เป็นคอนเซปต์ที่สำคัญก็คือ Myanmar led Myanmar own ดังนั้น การพูดคุยของผู้ที่มีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องในประเทศเมียนมามีความสำคัญที่สุด
Now, I want to talk about the timing of this planned visit. This visit is slated for August, which is 1 month after the state of emergency is set to expire in Myanmar. And I'm hearing word that there'll be an interim body or some form of body that will be formed to organize transition as well as elections in December. Now, August is also 2 months ahead of a peace anniversary. In October, Myanmar will see its 10th year anniversary of the nationwide ceasefire agreement. Now, that peace plan is a huge peace plan by then President Thein Sein. So it's very likely that the Myanmar army, because of these developments, will also share with these visiting foreign ministers plans to transit and to hold elections.
Oh, thanks for that. Wai Kit. Jagruti, let's bring you in now. We just heard Wai Kit. They were talking about a continued civil war in Myanmar and ASEAN's efforts to address it. Of course, they'll be looking to China, which might play a very big part in helping ASEAN resolve what's happening in Myanmar. Both US and China at this ASEAN Foreign Ministers Meeting looking for support. Mr. Rubio has a very tough job given that he has tariffs coming from President Trump as he seeks to reassure this region. What kind of conversations do you see him having with friends and allies at Kuala Lumpur?
Yeah, I think he's going to be having some very challenging conversations with both friends and competitors. And I think that's the nature of the beast right now, right? That he is, these tariffs have caused friction between partners and allies as much as they have with competitors in trade. And you see that you saw that in the Biden era, where the Biden administration's pivot to Asia was creating some challenges for Asian countries in how they were balancing their relationships between the United States and with China. Of course, Donald Trump's focus on Asia has been derailed somewhat by the escalations in the war in Ukraine and then conflict in the Middle East. And now Donald Trump's tariff endeavors are causing real tensions. And the unexpected nature of them, I think, is also causing some surprise in Asia. And that is causing a sense of needing to rebalance relationships. So I think those are the sorts of conversations that are going to be had. And you can see that Marco Rubio and his diplomatic effort, the language he's using of trying to say that we are not going to abandon Asia, that we are committed, the United States is committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific, language that you heard a lot during the Biden era, is resurfacing again. But of course, in this tense tariff environment, those sorts of diplomatic conversations are probably going to be much more challenging.
One of the challenges being that many countries are still uncertain what Mr. Trump might actually be targeting. So Brazil's 50% levy coming just after he threatened extra duties on BRICS countries, accusing them of un-American sentiment and behavior. Given that, say, India is part of BRICS, China is part of BRICS, Russia is part of BRICS, this levy on Brazil, what are the repercussions emerging from this?
I think one of the things that's emerging from this is, again, a sense of how Donald Trump uses tariffs and views tariffs. He sees it as a broad brushstroke weapon to try to pressure countries. And part of this tariff salvo against Brazil is in this letter to do with the case against Jair Bolsonaro, the current President Lula's predecessor, who's facing charges for allegedly being part of a coup in the last election. And this is something that Donald Trump has called a witch hunt. Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro were considered very close allies, Bolsonaro being considered Trumpian in his approach. And so what we are seeing is the way in which Donald Trump is using tariffs to wield influence and to pressure countries. Now, these 50% tariffs President Lula has threatened to reciprocate, which would be huge. And this is interesting because the United States actually has a surplus in trade with Brazil, exporting things like airplanes and iron as some of its top products. So it's interesting that he's targeting Brazil in this way. How it's going to play out is going to be very difficult to predict. I mean, as I say, President Lula has threatened reciprocal tariffs, which it's been a while since the country has threatened to do that with President Trump's tariffs. So I think it's really to see whether this August 1st deadline, how hard and fast it is. Remember, other letters have been sent to other countries as well. So deals are being done. Donald Trump is saying if you build in America, then there will be no tariffs. So again, is this a weapon that's being used to try to pressure other countries to build more in America? And will they agree to it by that new August 1st deadline? Or is that deadline, in fact, yet another movable target?
Oh, thanks, Jagruti Davi reporting live to us there from Washington, D.C. and CNA's Leong Wai Kit in Kuala Lumpur looking beyond, just for a moment, beyond tariffs.